You're listening to the Divorce and Your Money Show, the #1 podcast that discusses the complex business of divorce. I'm your host, Sean Lehman, MBA and Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. Be sure to visit us at divorceandyourmoney.com. And when you get there, one of the best things you can do is check out the store where you can get access to all almost 170 episodes of the podcast. It's more than 50 hours of information organized into the key topics so you can quickly find the information that's most relevant to you. Trusted by more than 80,000 people across the United States and soon going to be over 100,000 people. And you can find those great resources at divorceandyourmoney.com/store. In this episode, I want to discuss why most of you listening will want to finalize your divorce in 2018 if you're thinking about going through the process or if you're already in the middle of the divorce process. Because after 2018, divorce is going to be even more complicated than it already is. And it's going to be the first of several episodes this year, particularly early this year, when it comes to taxes and understanding what's going on with taxes. Now, why taxes and why is this so important this year? And why does it make you want to, ensure that you speed up your divorce process? Now, for most of you, you want an efficient divorce process and you want to get it over with reasonably quickly. But here's a reason to do it. Now, I know taxes. Why am I talking about taxes? Well, if you listen to me long enough, I won't say that I love taxes, but I find them extraordinarily important. And here's why. If you were told that as part of your divorce settlement, you could get 20% to 50% more money just by how you structured your divorce settlement, then you would probably want to know that. Or if you're on the other side of things and you could save 20 to 50% in expenses or assets by the way that you just structure your divorce settlement, you would be listening very closely. Is how can you save 20 to 50% of your money just in how you structure your settlement? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's taxes. Now, taxes are complicated. I'm not an accountant, just a financial advisor. And as anyone who deals with taxes will say, everyone's situation is very different. And are taxes a fun topic? No, not really, but they are critically important. Now, if you don't already have it in the podcast archive, so if you go to divorceandyourmoney.com/store and you go to the archive, there's an extraordinary amount of information in the archive at a low price. It's one of the best values you could possibly get anywhere. Well, you go to the archive, there is a big section on taxes and lots of different ways to think about tax considerations. So I really encourage you to go to the website, go to the store, get that archive. And if you have any questions about the information in the archive, because there's so much information there. I mean, it's at this point 50 hours and some. I'll certainly, just once you buy it, there's a link that says, email me and I will happily answer any questions you might have. Now, when it comes to taxes this year, there's something important changing. And let's start with how the alimony and support work today. We're talking about spousal support, not child support. But actually what's happening is spousal support is becoming more like child support. And here's what we're talking about. So today, in 2018, and in the 75 years before 2018, that's right, 75 years of the same rule is changing this year. Or I should say at the end of this year. If you receive alimony, you claim that as income and you have to pay taxes on it. Now, if you're the person paying alimony, or also called spousal support, you get to get a tax deduction for paying said alimony. It gets taken from your income. Now, here is what is changing. Starting January 1, 2019, for all divorce settlements, if you're the person receiving alimony, that does not count as income to you. And if you are the one paying alimony or spousal support or maintenance, depending upon what it's called in your state, all the same thing, you do not get a tax deduction for paying such alimony, maintenance, or spousal support. Now, what does that mean? Why is that such a big deal? Well, here's the deal. If you're the person paying spousal support, you get no tax benefit for paying spousal support. So, what does that mean? You're going to have an incentive to pay even less support than you would otherwise. Because the reason that you could have been a little bit more generous, maybe 10% generous, or 20% generous, or 30% generous, or 50% more generous, is because you could claim a tax deduction for that. And what that means from the other side is people receiving support, you're probably going to be getting less, or at least you have a high likelihood of getting less. And where does this all come from? Well, this all comes from the tax bill that President Trump passed in late December. I think it was somewhere in the last week or two of December, a tax bill passed, and there was a small provision in there regarding spousal support and alimony, removing the tax benefits for the deduction. And you would say, well, this is really going to hurt me for some of you. And I did get a few panic calls. Well, here's the deal. Wrap up your divorce, if you can at all control it, in 2018, and you won't have to worry about it. Now, if your divorce goes until 2019 and the papers aren't signed until then or any time after, as far as we know, you will be affected by this change. So, if you are if you're in a situation where you're the person paying support, there could be an incentive for you to wrap up your divorce now because you get the tax benefits. Now, if you're the person receiving support, you are highly likely to get more support this year than if you were to delay a year. And I'm going to get a little bit more into this and why this came to be. Hopefully, that's the clear and simple explanation. But it's something that you should really consider. And I know a lot of you, I get to work with people on all sides, all incomes, any kind of situation I get to work with on a daily and weekly basis. Now, here's the consideration. If you are, and actually I was looking up the statistics. So there's a statistic floating around from a recent census in the past, decade or so about who receives spousal support today. And according to the numbers that I could find, about 97% of the people receiving alimony are women. And of course, most of them were either stay-at-home parents or worked fewer hours than their husbands. But one thing that is interesting and I get to see is actually I do have quite a few, more than most would imagine, women. Actually, I'd say about 50% of the women that I get to work with are breadwinners in their families, and their husbands are the ones who stay at home or for whatever reason refuse to work. And I will leave it at that. It's a running joke between all of my breadwinner women clients why their husbands don't work or choose not to, but that's a separate story. The point being is that the vast majority of people in the country who are going to be affected by this law are women, and they're not in the best position possible. Now, just because you're going to be affected by this law doesn't mean you don't have options. And one thing that's very important that people forget, and it's one of the favorite things and one of the most important things that I get to do when I work with you, is come up with clever solutions and creative solutions that work for everyone. And I'll give you an example. A very simple example is if you know that you're going to probably get less in spousal support for the foreseeable future, well, you can actually structure your settlement so that you get more money up front. And when I say more money up front, I mean a lump sum where the equivalent money that you're getting up front will make up for the tax benefits that you would not be receiving or that your spouse might not be receiving. And there's ways to structure lump sum settlements. You're going to have a hybrid and there's a lot of negotiation. It's a pretty complicated thing to do sometimes, but there's an equivalent way to get more money up front that should help you in the longer term if you're not expected to receive that same level of support. There's also different assets that you should consider taking that if you're smart about it, you can end up in just as good a situation as you would have even if this law were not coming. Now, the other thing to think about is, and I don't want you to panic. And the thing to remember, whether you're listening to this in January or whether you're listening to this in June, or if it is coming towards the end of the year when you hear this, end of 2018, then you should really think hard and come up with solutions. But I'll have lots of resources and thoughts and ideas, and you can always book a call to discuss more. But it's not the end of the world. It's just that you need to understand that the rules of this, I hate to call it, but the rules of the divorce game are changing. Now, one of the questions that most people are thinking, I want to avoid any political discussion on this show, but why is the law changing? That's a big question. So up until the end of this year, alimony, taxable income to the person receiving, tax deductible to the person paying. But why is this all of a sudden changing in 2019? Well, there's actually a good reason for it. Now, in the grand scheme of tax bills and federal spending, this change will be negligible when you think about the overall budget. But a lot of people are asking me, why make this sudden change to the divorce rules? And I want to give you some rough numbers that I could find to explain the situation. So each year, so we'll use, call it around 2017 and 2016, there were about 350,000 people in the United States who claimed on their taxes that they are paying spousal support. Okay, about 350,000 people approximately who said they're paying spousal support. And therefore, they are getting a tax break for that. Now, on the other side of it, only about 180,000 people said that they were receiving spousal support and therefore paying taxes on that spousal support. So 350,000 people said they were paying, 180,000 people actually said they were receiving, which means there were about 170,000 people who were receiving spousal support and not reporting it on their taxes. And that gap was billions of dollars in tax revenue that was being lost. It's causing a lot of complications for our tax reporting and IRS and other agencies to try and figure out, well, why are all these people not claiming the alimony as income? And so what they did is they said, guess what? Since people are not reporting it, and there's such a big gap in the billions of dollars every year, we're just going to remove it entirely. So now there is no tax benefit to paying, no tax consequences to receiving, and that is that. And so that unfortunately is going to affect all of you listening, or at least could affect all of you listening. Now, I want you to keep in mind that this is just the first time that we're talking about this. And so we're going to talk about it further and some ideas to help you structure your settlement a little bit better. This is kind of like if you had booked a phone consultation with me. This is kind of let's talk through it a little bit, some things to think about. You're basically getting free advice on this one and save you some money. But I want you to be cognizant of these things. The other thing to really think about is, and I can't get into all the details because this gets really complicated, but if you think about tax rates and their percentages, basically. And when you think about those percentages, it's not going to be the case that if you were going to receive $100 a month in spousal support, that all of a sudden in 2019, if you got divorced, you were going to get $10 a month. No, that's not the case. It's basically going from $100 a month to something like 60, not 60, but probably like somewhere between $70 to $90 a month. It just depends on your situation. Now, is it less? Yes, unquestionably. Does that going to add up? Unquestionably. But it's not going to be the case that most of you should panic. It's just that you need to understand how this is going to affect you in the context of child support, in the context of retirement plan, in the context of having a mortgage payment, which was also affected by the tax bill, if in the context of all of the property that you have, if you understand that maybe you're going to lose somewhere between 10 to 30% of what you would have normally gotten in spousal support, well, how do you make up for that loss otherwise? What are the ways that we can solve that so you end up in about the same place? But it's just something that we have to be smart about. I mean, everyone who is listening to this show, who I get to work with, but just everyone who's listening to this show gets to learn far more than most people ever think about who are facing divorce. And you will, just by you thinking about these things, what can I do? How can I have some wiggle room in my situation and scenario, will allow you to come through this in a better position possible, just knowing these things and knowing what you need to be thinking about today. Since you made it this far, I want to make sure that you get access to some really important information before you go. And there's a couple of resources I want to highlight at divorceandyourmoney.com. Now, if you click on the store, you will see the full podcast archive. It's about 50 hours of information, more than 160 episodes, and it's organized neatly into easy to follow topics. So if there's something that you really want to learn about, how to manage a relationship with your divorce attorney, how to handle retirement accounts, a particular financial issue that you're interested in, or how to just prepare, how to get organized, get access to a great checklist of information, you can get all of that in just the full podcast archives. It's very affordable, and it is one of the best resources that I recommend everyone get to help you. In fact, when I do my coaching calls and virtually everyone, I say, hey, by the way, there's 3 or 4 or 8 podcast episodes you can listen to help you navigate this subject. And you will come away much more informed and prepared just by getting the podcast episodes. And the second thing I want to make sure that you're aware of is you can book a one-on-one coaching call with me. That's right. You can work directly with me there. The introductory strategy calls are 30 minutes. Just go to divorceandyourmoney.com/coaching and you can get direct access to my schedule. And the coaching calls are great. They're one of my favorite things. I get to talk with you all across the country and sometimes Americans living abroad to help with your divorce issues and to help you navigate what's going on. These strategy calls aren't sales calls. These are really digging in to the things that matter most to you. And they range by person. Sometimes we talk about your attorney, and if your attorney's doing a good job, sometimes we talk about specific case issues, like how you should present something in front of a judge, or how you should negotiate a particular element of your settlement. And other times, you just want some motivational thinking or you just want some neutral advice. A lot of times people call and say, look, I've been getting this advice from my attorney. Does this make sense? Are there other things that I should be doing? Is this the best course of action? Are there other courses of action? And sometimes it's just nice to speak with someone like me, to have a neutral person who can give you their experience and their perspective. And it's nice to have someone who's not just a family or friend member who's biased. I'll tell you the goods and the bads of what's going on in your situation. I'm very realistic, very neutral, and I'm pretty easy to talk to. So you can go book a coaching call. They all start right now with a 30-minute strategy session. And of course, there's other packages depending upon your situation after the strategy session if you need them. And you can also just work on a coaching call basis. But that's divorceandyourmoney.com/coaching. Last thing before you go is subscribe wherever you listen, on your favorite podcast player or on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. You will automatically get the new episodes when they come out. I'm your host, Sean Lehman, MBA and Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. Thank you so much for listening.